I propose we continue. So for the rest of the afternoon, I need one of those. I need one of those hammers that the directors of the paying agency hand over at the end of each presidency. It was always my dream, actually, too. So, welcome back. I propose we continue. So, this afternoon we have two presentations on accreditation. And it's the right moment to do a small introduction. In my unit, which is the unit responsible for the financial clearance, as you may all know by now, we have done a small reorganization to organize our work in relation to the paying agencies geographically. So we have two accreditation and irregularities teams that between them split the member states and paying agencies between them. So we have here, of course, David Turki, who is the team leader for one of the accreditation and irregularities team, and Vincent Lisunaram, who is the leader of the other accreditation and irregularities team. So, but for the presentations this afternoon, it's David that is going to make the presentations. David.
Thank you also for the introduction. So you know who I am, although I think I knew many of you. The presentations that we are gonna go through now, it's a kind of follow-up of something which was already presented by our colleague Sandra de Almeida, from whom we received this heavy legacy, me and Vincent. And it's about general, it's about the accreditation rules for the coordinating bodies and the PAs under the new delivery model. So we're gonna highlight the main new element, which are not actually new, as you already know, and to try to give some practical examples about the work that we expect to be carried out in relation to this accreditation criteria by the paying agencies and also eventually by the certification bodies. Also trying to give you some feedback from the clearance, as I was anticipating this morning. And I will do it with my colleague Agnieszka Lak, which also works in this accreditation team. So, okay, as I just told you, we will split this presentation about the new elements about the accreditation of the paying agencies, trying to give you some practical examples, and then to quickly touch on the role of the coordinating bodies, also trying to give you some feedback about the results of the last clearance exercise. About the paying agency, so once again, as was already presented, not only by Sandra, but also in many occasions during the last expert group meetings, especially, the new, let's say, the revised procedures to be performed by the PA and then also the controls to be carried out by the certification body about the horizontal controls to, let's say, all the accreditation criteria which are not directly linked to transactions, can be summarized as follows. So about the HR standard, control environment and ethical values. As you know, the aim of the regulation is that the PA shall demonstrate commitment and integrity of the staff, and all management, at all management level, this behavior should be demonstrated. And of course, we expect that standards of conduct are set out, and those standards are well understood at all levels of the organizations, are formalized and also outsourced to the delegated bodies or service providers and beneficiaries. To ensure this implementation, the process in place to assess whether individuals and entities are aligned with these standards, let's say all possible deviation should be addressed in a timely manner by the PA, and then, of course, assessed by the CB. Moreover, in terms of HR procedures, the PA shall also demonstrate commitment to attract people, develop and retain competent individuals, which is something that is very often highlighted by the CB. So problem in the organigram of the PA, lack of staff, lack of qualified staff. Although it's something that is not always very easy to assess, but it is one of the main issues that is recurrent from the certification body's reports. Some practical examples about this accreditation criteria and how can they be assessed by the CB. I think, and I also kind of hope that it will be a bit redundant what I'm saying, but it's always good to refresh our knowledge. And I give the floor to Agnieszka.
Good afternoon. So I will give some practical examples, as Davide already said, what should be verified by the certification body for the different accreditation standards. I will start with human resources. So first of all, the certification body needs to verify if the paying agency has sufficient qualified staff to perform their tasks. It should be verified not only at the level of the whole paying agency, but also at the level of the different departments and teams of the paying agency. The CB should also check if there is any significant turnover of staff in the paying agency, and if so, to verify if the paying agency search for the reason for this turnover and undertakes any remedial action to improve the staff situation. The CB need to check if the paying agency performed a workload analysis to verify what is the outcome of this workload analysis, if any remedial actions are undertaken by the paying agency if necessary. Furthermore, the certification body should verify if sufficient training is provided to all levels of staff in the paying agency in terms of general training, for example, on the ethical values of prevention of fraud and conflict of interest, but also on specific training, for example, for the different tasks performed by the staff in different departments of the paying agency. The CB should also check whether the paying agency has appraisal procedures and if those appraisal procedures are correctly applied by the paying agency. As regards the checks to be done by the CB for the accreditation criteria ethical values, the certification body should first of all verify if the paying agency has clearly defined standards of conduct. Are those standards of conduct clearly communicated and available to all levels of staff, delegated body, outsourced service providers, and beneficiaries? For example, are there training organized for all these groups on those standards of conduct? The CB should verify if the standards of conduct are correctly applied and respected by all levels of staff and all the groups mentioned before. The CB should also verify if the paying agency has procedures in place in case of non-respect of the conduct of the standards of conduct and whether those procedures are indeed applied.
Another main element which was introduced with the new regulation, it's the risk assessment into the internal and control environment, which was not, as I was saying, something actually new, because those kind of checks were already supposed to be performed by the PAs, but the regulation was slightly amended also to reflect the internal control standards as also regulated by the COSO report, for example. So for the risk assessment, I'm mainly quoting from Annex 1 to the delegated regulation. It's important that the PA clearly identify the objective and assess and identify the related risk, of course. As usual, it's important to identify and assess any changes that could impact the internal control system, and analyze that those risks could be the basis to determine how new risk should be managed. It's important that the PA implements measures to prevent and mitigate this risk, and a regular overview of the risk assessment and of the measures put in place to prevent or mitigate this risk is performed. And what is very, very important and stressed during for the new delivery model, it's the importance of the anti-fraud strategy implemented by the PA, comprehensive of a risk assessment, and also the conflict check procedures. Also for this, we'll try to give some more practical examples.
As regards the prevention of fraud, the CB should verify, first of all, if the paying agency has adequate procedures to prevent, detect, correct, and deter fraud. Does the paying agency has anti-fraud manual and fraud prevention plan? Are regular trainings organized on prevention of fraud for all levels of staff? Are the paying agency's procedures to prevent, detect, correct, and deter fraud effective? So were there any fraud cases identified by the paying agencies, and were they correctly followed up by the paying agency? As regards the conflict of interest, the certification body again should check if the paying agency has adequate procedures to prevent, detect, and manage conflict of interest. The CB should verify if the employees of the paying agency have to sign a declaration on conflict of interest, and indeed, if they are signed by the staff. Does the paying agency have a system to report conflict of interest, and is the staff of the paying agency informed and aware of this system? And if there are regular trainings organized on management of conflict of interest for all levels of staff?
As well, it may also look a bit redundant, but of course, as usual, we encourage the CB as much as possible to challenge the PA's procedures, in the sense that, of course, it is important and crucial to assess whether adequate procedures are put in place and implemented, but it's also very important to analyze these procedures and to assess up to which extent those procedures are realistic. The PA is able to implement them. They are clearly communicated to the staff. The staff is aware and respect these procedures. The PA has instruments to assess whether this procedure is respected by the staff, etc. So, of course, we understand that it's a complex exercise and that the CB has very limited time, but those are controls that should be carried out on a regular basis. Quick refresh as well about the role of the coordinating bodies within the new programming period, and about the accreditation criteria which are applicable to the coordinating bodies. As you know, we all know what is a coordinating body and which are the duty of the coordinating body, especially within the new implementing period. So, collected information to be made available to the Commission and to send it to the Commission subject to a specific accreditation, to take action with a view to resolving any deficiency of a common nature and keep the Commission informed and followed up, promote and, where possible, ensure harmonized application of the Union rules, and what is covered by the scope of the certification body opinion, supply the Commission the annual performance report and provide the management declaration covering the compilation of the entire performance report, of course, in the member states having more than one paying agency. The condition for the accreditation for the coordinating body. The declarations to the Commission are based on information from properly authorized sources. We have to make sure that the declaration to the Commission are also properly authorized before the transmission, that a proper audit trail exists to support this information transmitted to the Commission, and a record of information received and transmitted is securely stored and computerized. And this is what it is translated into the two components of the accreditation matrix applicable to the coordinating bodies. Security of internal IT systems and communication. And as regards the compilation of the APR, an administrative organization and the system of internal control compliant with requirements set by the competent authority as regards the procedures involved and with the accreditation criteria on information and communication, as I was saying. So, those are the new accreditation criteria that you started assessing as from the previous financial year, together with the assessment of the management declaration covering those information. After this quick recall, we'd like to give you a quick feedback about the preliminary results and recommendation. I call it preliminary because this year the role of the coordinating body concerning the transmission of the performance report was rather limited. As we already mentioned a few times, the expenditure under the new programming period were quite limited, so it was a soft start, let's say. Nevertheless, we have received some recommendation in the CB reports, and here is a quick summary of them.
So first of all, we would like to say that so far DG Agri has received accreditation acts of the coordinating bodies for coordinating bodies. So it means that still 2 accreditation acts to be issued by the competent authorities, some missing from 2 member states. We would like just to remind those member states that these accreditation acts need to be issued at the latest before the extension of the execution of the new duties by those coordinating bodies. The certification bodies reported some findings on the accreditation of the coordinating bodies in their reports for financial year 2023. There was a major finding and some intermediate findings concerning the information system security, and namely that the IT system for compliance of the annual performance report is not fully developed, or that it has some deficiencies which still needs to be fixed. And as regards the accreditation criteria communication, there were some intermediate findings. For example, a lack of detailed description of the organization and functioning of the new task related to completion of the performance report, submitting it to the Commission and signing the management declaration, and also that the procedures for drawing up the performance report did not include the necessary details. What needs to be done in financial year 2024 for the accreditation of the coordinating bodies? The competent authorities should ensure that appropriate remedial actions are put in place to address the deficiencies identified by the certification bodies. The competent authorities should keep the coordinating bodies under supervision as regards its compliance with the accreditation criteria. And in its audit reports for financial year 2024, the certification bodies should provide its assessment on the coordinating body's compliance with the accreditation criteria. So that's all from our side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Just a quick to complement what Agnieszka was saying. Those issues that we just summarized were not yet officially communicated to the member states. Similarly to the conformity issues that we were mentioning this morning. So it's something that will be communicated in the future. I give back the floor to Katia.
I suggest you do also the small presentation on delegation issues, and we take all questions at the end.
Okay, to complement what we were presenting, the last topic that was not touched in the previous presentation was about delegation. Also because we tried in this presentation to give some example and clarification about the delegation versus what can be outsourcing of tasks. Also trying to reply some questions that were raised by some member states. Bearing in mind that it's also an interpretation of the regulation, and it's not always straightforward to clearly identify the the border between delegation as per regulation or a simple outsourcing of tasks. But as we will see in this presentation, the way they should be treated and also to be checked by the CB are rather similar, we can say. Starting as usual from the legal references, when we talk about the accreditation criteria delegation, of course we are always quoting from Annex 1 of the Delegated Act. You know that the PA is allowed to delegate any of the tasks except for payment. That the PA, of course, is in any case still responsible for the management and control of the EAGF and the EFRD expenditures, and that as we also presented in the past, it has to be paid particular attention, especially by the CB, that in the context on the new programming period within the implementation of the CAP strategic plan, the situation, the framework of the delegation may have been amended, may have changed. So the controls, the checks in this regard about the delegation and about the monitoring of this delegating task by the PA, it's even more important within the scope of the CB's work. So, as I was saying, this slide that I just presented was summarizing Annex 1 to the Commission Delegated Act 127. So, quickly going through it, as I said, of course, the paying agency in any case remain responsible for the management of the funds. Of course, a written agreement, it's mandatory, must be concluded between the PA and this delegated body. And that the responsibilities of the bodies, PAs and delegated, shall be clearly defined in the agreements. That the PA shall ensure that all these bodies have effective systems, and the other body, the delegated body, shall confirm to the paying agency that all the tasks are fulfilled and describe the means employed. And the paying agency shall regularly review the task delegated, confirm the work performed, supervise it, and assure the compliance with the union rules. How those dictates from the regulation apply in case we are not assessing a purely delegated task, but rather some tasks which are kind of outsourced by the PA. And in any case, afterwards we'll see some examples to try to understand these differences. In any case, there must be a written agreement between the PA and the service provider, in this case, rather than delegated body, even though a lower level of formalization is required. And of course, even more than in case of delegation, the PAs remains fully responsible for the efficient management of the funds, the legality and regularity of the transactions, etc. In case of externalization of tasks, the paying agency does not need to ensure and to assess the systems implemented by these providers or other bodies, because it's what we care about is the results of these outsourced tasks, of which the PA have to assure the compliance with the accreditation criteria. So also the accreditation criteria regarding the monitoring of delegated tasks, of course, does not really apply to in this case. Something that in the past may also have created some confusion and may have been treated as delegated tasks, even though it was not purely a delegation. For example, technical assistance to PAs or other member state authorities like managing authorities or audit authorities in the performance of any kind of control, administrative or on-the-spot controls. When, for example, we have some external service provider, technical entities participating in the control process, but without taking the full responsibility of the authorization of the claim, for example. So we have some intervenant during the process taking care of a specific aspect of the control, the responsibility of which still stays to the PA. In this case, we cannot really talk about delegation, although we also have cases where in some member states the controls, especially the on-the-spot controls, are fully delegated to some either other entities, other authorities, or external private or public delegated entities. Another classical example is IT services provided to the member state authorities, like IT security, maintenance of databases. In most of the cases, even if also in this case we have some delegation in some member states, but in most of the case we only have some intervention in part of the process in which the responsibility stays fully with the PAs. Sometimes we have assistance to any of the PA's departments. There are some paying agency having a framework contract with private, in general, service providers that they use to have some expertise in-house to reinforce any of the office, having, I don't know, a consultant in the accounting department for 3 months, or any other kind of assistance, for example, to the internal audit department, which is also something very, very common that happen. In this case as well, we are not talking about delegation because the responsibility and the implementation of the task stays fully with the PA. In terms of the check to be performed by the delegated, by the certification body on this delegation, what are the attention points? We have to be sure that the PA has written agreements with the delegated bodies, which are clearly specifying the delegated tasks, the nature of the information, and the supporting documents to be submitted to the PA, and the time limit within which they must be submitted. In case of externalization of tasks, as I was saying, similar checks have to be performed, also in case of outsourced tasks, because the existence of proper written agreements is also needed. Does the PA have procedures in place to monitor and supervise the delegated bodies? This include monitoring of the deadlines and ensuring that the delegated tasks are performed in set time limits, qualitative supervision of the delegated bodies, including the re-performance and administrative and on-the-spot controls carried out by delegated bodies, and those are the requirement of the monitoring accreditation criteria that you know very well, and you are supposed to assess when checking the PA's procedures. As we were saying, if we are talking about outsourced tasks, the PA is responsible for the for the outcomes, what the CB has to assess is that the results of this outsourced tasks can have an impact on the accreditation criteria. So we are not really interested in the way the tasks are outsourced, but rather on the results of this externalization. Are the PA's procedures to supervise the delegated body effective? This is a very crucial point, as we keep repeating, and as you see in most of our recommendations in the 30th of April letters. Are the deficiencies identified during the supervision properly followed up by the PA? So once again, those are the main recommendations that we always have about delegation. In case of outsourced tasks, the PA does not really need to formally supervise the way the external provider performs the tasks, but rather to make sure that, once again, the outcome of this outsourced tasks are compliant with the accreditation criteria. That was everything about delegation. And I give now the floor back to Kat.
Thank you, Davide. So these were the presentations we mentioned earlier on accreditation. And if you have any questions, we're happy to take them now. Austria.
I have a question. We already wrote this question, I think 1.5 years before on the Commission, but we did not get any answer. We have bioorganic control organizations which are obliged by law to check the criteria at the farmers' premises every year to see whether they fulfill the obligations to obtain the organic certificate or to hold. And now the paying agency has entrusted these organizations with checking the on-the-spot controls for these organic farmers. Is this a delegated body or not? Because they are obliged by law. Firstly, that's.
Okay, assuming that if you have not received a clear answer in 1.5 years, I don't know if I will be able to do it in a few minutes, probably not. But of course, we will provide an official answer to these questions. What I can already tell that the fact that one entity is obliged by law to perform, by national law, to perform this control does not really mean that in this case this entity is not considered as delegated. Also in other member states there are some bodies which are identified by national law as in charge of some tasks, especially the controls, but doesn't mean that they are not considered as delegated tasks in the sense that they perform part of, in this case, the authorization procedure, taking the responsibility of it. Therefore, they must comply with the accreditation criteria, and the PA has to ensure an adequate supervision of these tasks, because even if this entity is appointed by law, if the tasks performed are not up to standards and not compliant with the accreditation criteria, the fact that it has to be performed by this entity doesn't mean that it can be performed in any way or without adequate supervision.
But we have to fulfill the accreditation criteria, but we are not a delegated body.
Sorry?
The conclusion is that they are obliged by law, so these biocontrol organizations are not a delegated, not to consider as a delegated body, but they have to oblige the accreditation criteria. To fulfill the accreditation criteria, that means that the paying agency has to supervise, has to make a supervision to these buyer control bodies.
Okay, but just to be clear, you need to receive their results and check that they have done. Okay, but that's in the context of what we are saying in our presentations, that you need to supervise them in some way. I mean, we don't mean tell them how to do it, but you need to check, because you are the paying agency who is responsible for the payments. You need to check that this control has taken place. So you need to receive their results. Okay? Yes.
Just one question. Because the problem in Austria is that this association is on the local level, it's not a federal organization. And the paying agency has not the power to supervise this local association, these local bodies. And the question was, we discussed whether these local associations has to fulfill the criteria responding conflict of interest. So must there be a system that conflict of interests are protected or are combated or not by this local association? Thank you.
Well, I mean, of course, we can look in more detail the setup in you are still Austria, right? Okay, in Austria, thank you. But I would say yes, because this is a control that needs to take place. We can understand that it doesn't take place by the paying agency and there are different bodies accredited, but of course the quality of the control and the certification should be of value. So there should be some respect of conflict of interest considerations. I mean, I don't go to check that my cousin in his farm does, bioproducts and say he does because he's a relative, but in fact he's not. I mean, it's common sense that the system should work irrespective of which body in each member state provides this type of certifications. I'm using the example in the first question that it's bioproducts, if I understood correctly. Okay.
Maybe if I can add just a few words, it's really matter of interpretation, of course, but to see up to which extent the intervention of this external entity, it's important, I would say, in the authorization process, because it can be, as I was discussing with my colleague, if it's just, I don't know, one of the eligibility criteria is to get the certification by the tax authority. Of course, I will not consider the tax authority as delegated body, and I will not check if the tax authority has adequate procedures. One of the could be something similar. I have to get the accreditation from the bio authority. Can it be assimilated? Maybe yes, maybe no. It's maybe too technical for me to assess it, but it's really an interpretation question that has to be checked on a case by case to see up to which extent they are involved in the authorization process and which kind of autonomy they have in this process. It's just obtaining a certificate, pretty straightforward, or they are really part of the authorization procedures, intervening, performing controls.
So we look at it from a member state perspective. So if you have regional organizations that give this type of certificates that the governance system is sound, of course, we need to look at it at member state level. I understand that maybe the paying agency may have difficulty to do the same type of of checks as in a normal delegated body that you delegate certain tasks, but at the member state level, I mean, these systems or these considerations should be taken into account. I think it's also common sense that. I hope we answered your question. Okay. Other questions on accreditation or delegation? Italy.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you. I'd like to ask on behalf of the competent authority. For around about a year now, we've been supposed to be reporting on the period up to 24 on the basis of what the competent authority has been doing now. As far as I know, this report to be submitted will also include the coordination body and details about it. I wonder if you could give us a bit of a heads up about the arrangements for doing all of this. Because, of course, the certification is done now with SFC, with pre-established fields, predetermined fields and such like now, in around about a year's time. I'm guessing that that will have to satisfy those criteria and look like that when we report it, or will it look the way that it did for the last 3-year period? In other words, would it be based on Guideline 3 in the chapters on the EAGF and the ERDF? Thank you.
So it's a bit early for us to to reply because it's next year. But thank you that you remember this report. I think the next one due is in 2025. So for the time being, we have not foreseen any developments in SFC for this, mainly because the biggest priority for us was the annual reporting requirements to be taken care of. But we take note of the question and we'll come back to it. Okay. Yes, and if you can tell us from which country you come from also, please.
Thank you, Ireland CB. Just going back to a question on delegation versus outsourcing, please. It was mentioned that the regulation is open to interpretation as to what constitutes delegation and what may constitute outsourcing. So I'm just wondering, are there any plans to issue some more specific guidance around those two different categories? Because I think sometimes when we look at the definitions and even the presentation this afternoon, it still is unclear as to what might constitute delegation versus outsourcing. And the statement that the PA remains responsible for the outcome of the outsourced tasks, it's difficult to see how the PA could be responsible for the outcome without doing a certain amount of work in relation to the outsourced entity and the procedures that the outsourced entity actually performs. Thank you.
So thank you for your question. That's why we thought it would have been useful to do this presentation we just did, but obviously it still leaves some open questions. We will also reply in writing in the Q&A document, but in general, when you externalize services or you outsource or whatever word you want to use for it, the entity that outsources retains the responsibility for those services. And usually, you put some terms in the contracts in order to ensure that, you will receive the service that you don't have resources to do in-house of the quality standard that you would like. And of course, before accepting the service to pay, usually, I'm talking about in general and best practice, you do some quality checks because you retain the overall responsibility for it. So that's not prescribed in the regulation. What is prescribed in the regulation is for tasks that are delegated to somebody else. But again, because the paying agency retains the responsibility, they should supervise. You should not just leave the delegated body alone forever to carry out those tasks without any form of supervision or, checking that the paying agency can still comply with the accreditation criteria for the tasks delegated. So there is a bit of a difference, but I don't know if we can define in a guideline guidance on outsourced tasks. So, we would try also to reply with these examples in the Q&A, but if there is something specific for Ireland that we don't address, please submit your question in writing so we can be more specific rather than trying to set general rules. Okay? Italy. Sorry, because they did say Croatia, but I couldn't spot you, sorry.
No, it's okay. I wouldn't like to complicate. My question is related only to the need, whether there is a need to sign a written agreement, so paying agency to sign a written agreement with public agency which performs certain tasks. For example, gives accreditation to control bodies, which gives certificates to beneficiaries in the field, I don't know by heart now in English, this is, I tried to find the word, marks of authenticity of agricultural products and so. So we know, because we saw that in procedures, that the agency, this specialized agency, does checks, for example, for conflict of interest between the control body and the beneficiary. So in fact, the control body should not be in conflict of interest with beneficiary to which gives certificate of authenticity. We know about procedures because the paying agency is informed about the procedures of that accreditation agency, but we want to know whether there is still need to have written agreement with such bodies, whether the paying agency should have written agreement or not. And is it some kind of outsourced control, this conflict of interest or not?
I would say that in any case, a written agreement should be prepared, and any kind of relationship between the PA or any other external body of any nature should be formalized in a written agreement. Then, once again, to identify exactly whether this agreement falls under the requirements of the regulation in terms of delegation or not, it may be more difficult to interpret. But if we stick on the controls for conflict of interest, for example. Whether we are talking about a pure delegation. For example, the PA signs an agreement with a private company or another public entity who performs all the first level control for these specific measures and acquire the results of these controls to authorize the payment. So it's purely delegation. You have to assess under all the criteria whether they respect also conflict of interest checks. If we only we perform the checks ourselves with the PA, but to perform these checks we also buy some advisory service from a company just for, I don't know, one day one inspector comes because I don't have such an expertise. Okay, this is not a delegation. I'm just buying in the market something that I'm not able to provide myself, but still, in the written agreement that I have with this company or entity or private person, I should at least set the minimum requirements. In a case of control, the conflict of interest, I think it's the very basic requirement that should be set, whether we are talking about delegation, externalization of tax, whatever kind of contract. And it is also mentioned in the regulation that the integrity and ethical values, etc., this applies for the PA, for the delegated bodies, or any, or also outsourced service providers. It's also, as my colleague is showing, is also clearly mentioned in the Annex 1 under human resource standard.
Thank you. And Italy now.
Grazie.
Thank you. As to the question of the third parties, the outsourcing bodies, outsourced bodies, always a bit tricky to handle. Perhaps in Guideline 1 it would be a good idea to put in clearer examples, bearing in mind as well that at present in Guideline 1 the only example relates to something now obsolete, that's export refunds. So there was the paying agencies who used to pay this aid, and the customs officials who actually conducted the checks. And of course that's something that no longer exists. That's been the case for quite some time now. So perhaps it'd be a good idea to put in another example, a nice clear one. And this was a good example, but as I said, it's outdated now.
Okay, we will amend Guideline 1 to include some more examples. Ireland has a follow-up question because.
And my question, some of it I think has been answered, and it's regarding outsourced tasks. Is the certification body obligated to check contract management for outsourced tasks and to check compliance of outsourced tasks to the accreditation criteria? And therefore, is the certification body obliged to check if contract is being met satisfactorily and that the standard of service meets expectations and requirements? Thank you.
So the answer to this question is that it depends. It depends on how far these outsourced tasks affect the functioning of the governance system. And of course, the certification body can use its professional judgment to see to what extent they need to cover those in providing or in getting assurance, to provide to the Commission assurance that the accreditation criteria have been complied with. But I think in the case of Ireland, obviously there is something specific that you may have in mind. So what I would suggest is to send us a written question with the specific outsourced contract or contracts that you have ongoing. So we understand exactly the specific example, and we try to give you a good answer. And who knows, maybe that would be a good example also to add in guideline 1 if we are going to amend it to include some more examples. Okay? Good. Anybody else? Okay, but sleep on it. If you have more questions, I'm sure we will have more time tomorrow. So before we conclude today, just some housekeeping and to remind you about tomorrow's sessions. So tomorrow we are going to start at 9 o'clock sharp. So please try to be on time directly with the workshops. So just to remind you, the rooms for every workshop. The first workshop, which is on the assessment of the governance systems, workshop 1, will be in room 1D. So it's the same room as this one, but one floor up. Workshop 2, land disposal, will be in room B on this floor. So room 0B. 0 is for the floor, B is the room. And workshop 3 on the submission and reconciliation of the annual performance report will be in room 0C. So on this floor, room C, just across the corridor. So please try to be in the correct room at 9 o'clock tomorrow. So we will start with the workshops. And we will meet after the coffee break actually in the first floor above, room 1D, so same room but one floor up, exactly above us, for the plenary session. So thank you very much for your participation. Thanks to my colleagues for their hard work and the presentations. And a big thank you to the interpreters, and see you all tomorrow.